Such a perfect day. Donald Trump got arraigned, and he looked like a sad little coiffed turd. Such a perfect day. I thought I would stream for you, because there's nothing else to do but celebrate. Oh, it's such a perfect day. I thought I'd spend it with you. Such a perfect day. My cat's staring at me weird. My cat's staring at me weird. That was probably super off key, and I don't actually know the words to that song, but it is such a perfect day. Donald Trump has been arraigned, baby. Hell yeah. It's not central booking. It's cooler central booking. I've been to central booking, but I know what it's like to be down there. There he was, guys. It's Tuesday. You know what time it is. It is time to, hand it to Stormy Daniels. Hell yeah. I think this can go down as the most famous adult film star ever. The most historic adult film star. The one, like, not every porn actor is going to get a note in the history books, y'all. I mean, obviously not in Florida, but everywhere else. Very exciting for Stormy. Thank you, Stormy. Everybody, tits out for Stormy Daniels. Sorry. Really excited to have y'all here. As you can tell, it's going to be a little bit of that kind of a show, but we're going to hammer down on some serious stuff. I have an incredible guest. Former Congresswoman Katie Hill is here. So excited to have her. We were both on the same MSNBC panel, and we just, I think, wanted to talk forever and ever about, like, being a mom, how effing racist, sexist this country is when it comes to, trying to raise a kid, being a woman in politics, all that. So I'm so excited to throw down with her today and get her thoughts on what's going on in Manhattan right now as we speak. Trump has left the building and he was arraigned for, I think it was about an hour, but we'll get into all that. In addition, Miles Kampf-Lassin is here. He is a reporter for Indies Times. He's actually the editor of Indies Times online. And he is going to break down what's going on in Chicago because there is a massive election today. Brandon Johnson versus Paul Vallas. We talked about it before when we talked about Lori Lightfoot leaving and her sad Modelo. So we're going to get into that. What's going on? Votes are clearly being cast right now. They're going to be counted. It's going to be a long night. Who knows, when we will know, but this couldn't be any more of of sort of good versus evil election, progressive versus lightweight Republican. And so I'm excited to talk to Miles all about that. But if you're here, hey, like the things, click the button. Remember to not only subscribe to this show, but turn on that little notification so you know every time we're going live. Also, if you're here listening as a podcast, give this podcast 5 stars. Preemptively, it's going to be a great show because it always is. And, objectively, it's a great show. This also is only one half of the Bitchuation Room. The Frantifa, the patrons of the show know you get an extra bonus bish every Friday, except for this Friday, y'all. I just have to say, I'm going to make it up to you. I'm going to see what I can do. But this Friday, Fam is going out of town. We're taking our first little trip with my 6-month-old. Wish us luck. Light some candles. Say some prayers. No one's going on a plane. Don't worry about it. But yeah, we're gonna get away for 48 hours, and we'll see if that works. So not streaming on Friday, but every other Friday, y'all, patrons get an hour of extra content. We're doing all kinds of weird stories. Last week we looked at some of the pushback to obviously the lack of gun control in Tennessee. Students have been rising up. Just amazing to see. We saw the lawmakers just crumble under the most basic questions. Now they're of course trying to strip Democrats of their ability to govern because the Democrats were standing with Tennessee children against gun violence and for gun control. So anyway, we get into all that. So patreon.com/bitchuation room, you know what it is. And of course, I've been mentioning this, but I haven't given you the link. You guys know you get the American Prospect, a year's subscription. If you're a patron, a year's subscription for just $24. So it's a 60% discount. You get it to your home if you become a patron. If you become a patron, you can get the online version for free. It already is for free, but this won't have any paywalls, pop-ups, etc. But if you want that physical edition, it is in your welcome notice when you become a patron. It's also posted now. So all patrons, if you missed that, the link is right there. Go sign up. We all love the American Prospect. We love David Dayan and all the work that they do over there. And we constantly sort of bring those stories up. So hell yeah, hell yeah, hell yeah. Let's get to it. Everybody, you know, what's your favorite? Let's just there's so much to talk about. So let's get into what we're bitching about quickly, and then we'll move to the big news. All right, folks. Well, I don't want to take up too much time with what I am bitching about, you know, which could be a range of things like what do you do with a baby all day? I don't know. Why would I pay for childcare when half of the time the baby is around is sleeping? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, this is all, what do you do? What am I need to get like a few lava lamps or something and suspend them from the ceiling. Um, anyway, it's fun. It's mind-numbingly boring to be a parent, and also like nothing but like the most pure, beautiful love I've ever felt in my life. So I'm bitching about, you know, it's like she can't enjoy this arraignment with me, and I'm like, oh my god. In fact, I don't ever want her to know the name. I feel like Trump will be the unmentionable in my household. It's like the way I feel about tablets, you know, and like screen time. Like we should try and hold out on letting her know who Trump is for the longest amount possible. That is where I'm at. So that's what I'm bitching about. You know, what to do when, you know, when the baby starts to get back muscles and when you get that upgrade, you know, because it can like sit up, you can like go out to places and it can like sit there. But right now it's just like I got like 5 seconds of back muscle time and then she flops over. So anyway, don't call Child Protection Services on me. I'm just a mom going through normal mom shit. Speaking of moms who are far more accomplished than I am and far more far more active actually in terms of not just bitching about it but being about it. Former U.S. Representative for California's 25th Congressional District and founder of a PAC you need to know about, which is called Her Time. Please welcome Katie Hill to the show.
Hello, I'm so glad to be here.
So glad to have you here. Oh my God. It's what a day. I'm really glad I'm spending it with you.
I am too. Yeah, this is pretty neat. Good timing.
Yeah, you know when you gotta where you're like, I don't what am I gonna do an Instagram live about this? No, I gotta talk about it.
I know.
But first, Katie, because since this is evergreen, people might come back, they might listen to this show, you know, Trump might be indicted for the 4th time by the time folks listen to this. What are you bitching about now that's maybe not about the Trump indictment?
Yeah, so we'll probably talk about this more later, but I have been through some things in the last few years, and
Oh.
long story short, I'm living with my mom, which is actually pretty amazing. But what I'm bitching about is the cost of housing everywhere. It's not just personally. I would like to not be living with my mom at 35 years old for too much longer, and it's just so crazy expensive to move anywhere around LA. But I know that's happening across the country, and the other work that I'm doing is on homelessness, which is that was my issue prior to running for Congress. And
Yeah.
and the situation has just gotten so much worse in terms of how expensive it is to be able to rent, let alone, like, we're not even talking about buying, but
No, no.
just rent for. It's hard enough for regular people who make, middle class incomes, but for people who are living on the margins, and struggling to, make a decent wage, it's impossible. And we're seeing that reflected in the number of people who are living on the streets and in shelters and in their cars. So
Absolutely. And I feel like we always sort of go through this. We're still bumping up against, I think, a lot of stigma around, like, well, all you got to do is work hard. Well, work harder. Just work harder, and then suddenly you'll be able to afford rent or a home, or, like, no.
no.
And so whenever we float, like, actual rent control, not just letting, the market dictate everything, you know stipends, right? Assistance, housing assistance, even not just for unhoused people, but, like you're saying, middle income people. Like, then we get this constant barrage. You saw it under the student loan debt relief,
Oh
where
yeah.
it's like, well, you get a handout. We live in a nanny state. And you're like, no, no, no. You live in a state of, like, complete and utter fantasy land where
Mhm.
somehow, you know, I mean, talk about make America, like, when did we, first of all, obviously, early, back in, like, 50s and 60s, I guess people could afford
Mhm.
homes.
Yeah, even up
That's
to the 80s and 90s, it was more feasible, but now it's just not. People who bought in our parents' generation and have stayed in their homes, or have, been able to flip it and buy bigger and bigger ones, they don't get it. They just don't get how impossible it is to, to try to enter that world, as somebody who is, our age or younger.
Yeah, I live in a place where I'm like, a lot of people who, like, I'd never be able to afford to buy here,
Right. Yeah.
moved in the pandemic, the rent was lower. Looking around, at just, like, cursory look at, like, other rents in the area, I'm like, "Oh, fuck, like, I
Mhm.
pay less. This is insane."
Yeah, hold on to it as long as you can before they raise the rents on you.
Absolutely, like, hell yeah, it doesn't matter, I'll live on this street, doesn't matter, it wakes the kid up every hour or whatnot, so every time I wanna complain about my landlord, I'm like, "Alright," but it's an important thing to bitch about, and I think we live in, like, again, a blue state, and I wanna talk to you about this later about, that's one of the biggest issues facing
Mhm.
California right
It
now.
is, it is. I mean, the mayor's race was all about it in LA, the governor's race, like, it's everywhere, and it's not gonna get better for quite some time because there's so many factors that go into it, and we're doing the right things. I think California is heading in the right direction, but there's a long, long way to go.
Absolutely. Alright, well, let's turn, of course, to the big, 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 big news, which is that Donald Trump has been indicted. That's right. Here he is, real mad, just steely-eyed, walking into, this is what, 2:30 um Eastern time, walking in to be arraigned in the courtroom. Um Here it just otherwise I'm not really worried about this, but, like, having, I think, NYPD flanking him with maybe some of his secret service, or no, that's his, I think he's got his lawyers behind him. I'm not sure. I think these are NYPD, or they're his secret service. I don't know. Do secret service wear badges like that?
No, I'm pretty sure they're NYPD.
That's what I think. So I'm like, hell yeah, I've been there too. I've been arrested a couple times.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, there he is. Here we are, seated with his lawyers. He's slumped over. His hair is looking quite coiffed. I will say that, though. He's got the coif down. The
He blow dried it special today, put on
Oh
a
yeah, the Aqua net is working real good. That's what he was doing on the plane. Oh my god. So here, you know what? This is just satisfying.
It
It's just
is, it
beautiful.
is. Yeah, I mean, it's been so long coming, and, I think that's why, you know, is this the crime that he should most be, held accountable for? He's got ones that are way worse, like, inciting an insurrection, but, uh, at least it's something. At least there
Yes,
is some sort of justice. Even just an indictment is, like, how I'm happy about that, as a because it seemed for so long like nothing was gonna happen, so,
I know. I
yeah.
know. And it's nice to see that, like, yes, the wheels of justice, it might like move slowly, but eventually, this comes down. I mean, we were talking about Stormy Daniels in 2016.
Literally, Michael Cohen came to testify in front of oversight when I was the vice chair under Elijah Cummings. And that was early on when I was in 2019. And I remember when that happened, my staff and I were talking about like, oh my God, this is so historic. This is like, a president, the fact that a president did something like this and we might be holding him accountable. What a joke. Like, yeah, there was no accountability. There was it and I can get into that for a million years, but but yeah, to know how much worse it got from there is pretty wild to look at in hindsight.
Right. This is one of the 4. We've got Georgia and finding 11,000 whatever the hell votes he wanted. We've got the stolen documents, and we've got the inciting an insurrection and trying to overturn the democracy, or an election. So yeah, not the gravest one, but definitely I think the most scintillating and exciting, and shoe on the other
and
foot.
Fitting. Truly just fitting.
Absolutely fitting. I said this on Newsbroke, which was at the time was like, look, him getting taken down by his favorite vice, which is just like, women,
and doing shady things with money,
and doing things with money at the same time, because it's perfect. It's like, Oompa Loompas are going to roll him out of the Oval Office because it's so on the nose what he would be taken down for. And also all of and we can get into, all the mudslinging at Stormy Daniels and her also being someone, who is a porn star, who's like open about that, right? Like she's not hiding it. It's fine. And kind of like she gets called all kinds of names, but because she does what she does and we're in, 2023, it's like, yeah, this is a job. We can all move on with our lives. If it were the 90s, the 80s, housing might have been more affordable, but as a porn star, you'd have to sort of live in shame, what a terrible profession, and all that.
Yeah, I think we've come a long way on sex work. There's still a long way to go, but
yes.
I'm happy. She seems to be getting a solid amount of respect that probably would not have been afforded her a couple decades ago.
Definitely. All right. Well, okay. So the indictment's been unsealed. People are, smarter than me are digging through it, but it looks like, this is according to the New York Times, there's 30 to 34 counts. 34 felony charges. They were elevated to Class E felonies, which is the lowest level of felony in New York State Penal Code. The grounds are that the conduct was intended to conceal another crime. Now, I don't think that crime is sleeping with a couple of women. I think it's something else.
I think it's campaign finance, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not only that he did the campaign finance fraud or the violation or the felony, but that he then worked to cover the actual thing up, which is what it's what he did in the documents case. It's like, yeah, not only did you take the documents, but once we subpoenaed you, you went and hid them somewhere else. And we're learning that this week. So it accuses him of violating election laws, making false entries in the business record of various entities in New York. The key legal question in the case was always how the district attorney would take the falsifying of business records charge, a misdemeanor, and make it a felony. So again, they're all 34 of them are felonies, and he pleaded not guilty. Apparently he was seated, said not guilty. And there were no handcuffs. It doesn't seem like there was even a mugshot, by the way.
Yeah, I'm a little bummed by that, but at the same time, like he would have used that so happily for his campaign that it's probably for the best.
I'm not that person who's like, oh, this is just really riling up his base and this is going to mean he's going to win. No, I don't agree with that. But I totally agree that mugshot is delicious. I like as wonderful as we would have wanted it. I'm trying not to say the word delicious. I know it's gross, especially when talking about Trump. But like as perfect as that would have been, yeah, they would have put it on shirts in a proud way.
Yes.
And like been like, and especially this is very exciting. Wait, hang on. He maybe, if he needed a mugshot, it would have been a group mugshot. This is according to a source that spoke to Rolling Stone. I wish I was joking, but I'm not, because Secret Service would have had to be there. So can you imagine, Katie, like him with just like flanked by Secret Service looking?
You gotta wonder too, like how much those Secret Service people hate him. Like I can't imagine they're big fans, But
No.
I don't know. Anyway, yeah, no, that would have been. It'll probably come if he actually faces these other more serious charges, and I hope he does. If you got four shots at a mugshot, maybe one will happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. And apparently, so this is again according to the Rolling Stone that he wanted the scene, so he was offered the chance to surrender quietly and be arraigned over Zoom. Wow, what a fitting way. The pandemic's been so kind.
Yep.
Instead, he opted for a midday high-profile booking at the Manhattan courthouse. He wanted a perp walk. He wanted daylight hours, said the law enforcement official who's involved in aspects of the security planning. This is his opinion, but here he says he wants to get out of the vehicle, walk up the stairs. This is a nightmare for Secret Service, but they can only strongly suggest, not order, that Trump enter through the secure tunnels. Trump wants to greet the crowd. This should surprise no one, especially not his detail. So right, he wanted that shot. I don't know if he actually entered through like a tunnel. I think he was.
I know. I was wondering that too.
Because we don't have a shot from outside, but I believe he was more just flanked by his own security and whatnot. So what was happening outside? There's just a few things that I want to show you. Marjorie Greene showed up because of course she did. And apparently, she was not able to be heard when she spoke to the crowd. This is according to Garrett Hake of NBC News. He says, one of the wildest scenes I've witnessed at a protest just concluded with a mob of photographers, reporters, and counter protesters blowing whistles, bracketing Greene's walk from her SUV to brief and almost entirely inaudible remarks in the park before going back to her car in a matter of minutes. So she popped out, said something, came back, but there were all these whistles. And so Garrett caught up with why they had all these whistles. Apparently it was some dude was just handing out whistles. And here I can't pinpoint his accent exactly. I want to claim Italian, but that's just the Italian in me. And there's like a part of him that sort of reminds me of my dad. But here's whistle dude or whistleblower, if you will, being interviewed about why the hell, if he supported Trump, what would he give a bunch of whistles out to people that just masked what Marjorie wanted to say.
Hey man, can I ask you a question? So, the whistles, where'd you get that idea?
Huh?
Where'd you get the idea for whistles?
Make a noise. Take one.
Oh, I'm good, but yeah. So you're pro-Trump.
Yeah.
You're handing out whistles to...
Yeah. Make a noise. Everybody must hear us.
Interesting. And
Everybody must hear us.
You don't worry that might be drowning out Marjorie Taylor Greene or whatever over there? You don't worry that might be drowning out the people speaking?
I like to make a noise. I'm here to make a noise. This is not a place to speak right now.
Very good point.
We're here to make noise. They have to hear us. Make America great again.
That's awesome.
I love that. Make noise. We're here to make noise. And you know what, Katie? That's as good of an encapsulation of MAGA mentality as anything else.
And what you say doesn't matter. What anyone has to say doesn't matter. Just make noise.
Yeah, what? Would you like a whistle? I'm sorry. Like, just, bless him. You know what I mean? That's very, very funny. And I just love that she was drowned out by everyone just blowing on a whistle. It's like the vuvuzela of the Trump indictment.
Yeah.
And then here was Representative Jamal Bowman, which I don't know if you saw last week. Him getting in, what was it, Representative Massey's face?
Oh, yeah. I did see that about gun issues.
Yeah, about gun control and all that. And here he is, Representative Bowman. Been on the show before, very exciting. And he's down there outside of the arraignment calling Marjorie out.
Do your freaking job, Marjorie Taylor Greene. You don't need to be in New York City talking that nonsense. Go back to your district. What are you doing here? You're here for politics. You're here because you want to be VP. You're here for your own fundraising. You're here for your own nonsense.
Nonsense. He's right.
You're here for your own nonsense. And she just made an appearance. She just got out. And I'm curious, what did you make? Did you watch at all? I was going to bitch about this, how Marjorie was interviewed by Leslie Stahl on 60 Minutes.
No, I refused. I was too mad about it. I couldn't believe they were having her on.
I mean, that's my feeling. I understand that she's an elected official. I can barely understand.
Give her a platform. Do not give, literally, she's psychotic. And I work with people with mental health issues. Like, I'm not trying to be disparaging about people with mental illness.
Right.
Is a problem, and nobody no legitimate news outlet should be giving her the time of day.
Not at all, especially when there's so many other people. Like I was saying, I had Representative Summer Lee on, first Black woman in Pennsylvania to rep, nationally. I had, I haven't had him, but Maxwell Frost, youngest Gen Z representative from Florida at a time when, Florida's losing it, but he's this. You could have many, many people on. So you don't need to have Marjorie Greene on. Okay, final clown who was at, not Jamal, but final clown who was at this arraignment. None other than George Santos. Of course, here he is wearing his, we'll decide what kind of designer. I'm feeling, I don't know. I think it's Prada. I think he's more Prada than Gucci, but we'll see. Here was George Santos making an appearance outside of the courthouse.
Is any president above the law?
No. But is this DA going to start criminalizing criminals?
How do you know what's
where's Hunter Biden's indictment? 2 years of a laptop full, a treasure trove of crime.
If the former president committed a crime, if he committed a crime, should he?
Is anybody accusing me of something?
Should he be held accountable?
Are you judge and jury?
Congressman, if the former president committed a crime, should he be held accountable, though?
This is not that crime, though.
No, why not?
This is old news.
Okay.
Just that guy is so much.
He's
very
a lot.
snazzy.
It's very snazzy.
Yeah.
Also, like lip injections. Can we talk about him?
For sure. There's some filler happening in a few places, I think.
Okay, Katie, I have to talk to you about this because here we have Marjorie Greene, Jewish space laser lady. We have Donald Trump, who obviously massively unqualified for his job, criminal, and George Santos, who's still not been asked to resign by the head of the Republican Party. Nope. And I can't help but see these three people surrounded in this clown show in the year 2023, and then be sitting down with you and think, oh my God, why are you still not in office?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, the standards are so different, right? For that side of the aisle just doesn't have any. I think we can all see that that's the case. My resignation too was a personal choice. It was one that I decided to make because the impact of having your nude photos shared with the entire world and becoming the focus of that, attempt by the right wing to basically make you, I don't know, their poster child of attack that they wanted to make against all Democrats and women and everything else. Like that was not something that I wanted to sit through and continue. I'm not somebody who wanted to be a politician my whole life. That was, a turn in course after Trump was elected because I felt like I had to do more. But you have to decide at a certain point, like how much are you willing to put up with, and I wasn't. I just wasn't. So
and it's sort of interesting the way that for all of someone like George Santos or Anthony DeVolders, for all of his lies and sort of the attacks, which are generally, obviously, I mean, some Republicans have critiqued him, but they're coming from Democrats and liberals. Obviously, he's a man. There's a different tenor, even on both sides. There's a different tenor when someone's has that privilege, but you don't see like him exposing the massive death threats, the insane, all the stuff that he's done is like really like really out there and in your face. It's not what was done against you, obviously, but it's also like that, just the tone of it. It's personal, but it's only personal because he made it personal by lying over and over and over again.
And just to see, like he's perfectly comfortable going out in public and walking around and he's defensive about it, but like, what are you accusing me of a crime? But he's not afraid. And the fact that he's not afraid, like that was a huge part of my decision to resign. Like my family was getting followed around. It was disgusting. My office had suspicious packages sent to them with like white powder in them. We had so many disgusting messages, emails, phone. The voicemails were particularly horrifying. And I don't know. I just don't think he's getting that. Like,
yeah,
maybe, but I feel like
no. I mean, again, I think we don't generally like, we dabble in like memes and, you know, I guess sometimes calling, I mean, we should call Congress and our elected officials, but like not a lot of death threats generally lobbed from Democratic voters and their base. I guess I want
Not
to
really
ask
our
you,
vibe. Yeah.
not really our vibe. I want to ask you about that double standard though, when it comes to like, you know, the right really ducked under, you know, the Me Too movement happened after Trump was elected. I believe it probably wouldn't have happened had Trump not won,
Right.
because it was
Yeah.
so clear we just elected, you know, the Me Too in chief. And the right has had this attitude of, oh, I'm just never going to admit when I've done something wrong, ever. And their party doesn't ask them to resign. Their party doesn't put pressure on them. Their party supports them. You had Matt Schlapp, right, the head of CPAC, only recently being accused of sexual assault against a staffer. And that's just he's just there. He's still there.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they've proven is that deny is the most effective strategy, right? Because and then they turn it on its head to say that people are persecuting them, and this is just, you know, I don't know. I think we genuinely, and I say we meaning Democrats, have a much more realistic sense of our own fallibility. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just me. I'm sure there are plenty. Yeah, it's just like, if
I think that's what's
mess
like,
up, own it.
for sure. I mean, accepting reality is generally part of like, you know, a liberal pro-democratic mindset, right? Like
Right.
denying that reality is everything to do with the folks who are like denying people abortion rights, taking away books that talk about real things that happen in history, all that crap. When all this happened to you, right? When your ex-husband, you know, effectively worked with a right-wing news outlet to expose revenge porn and nude images of you, what support did you receive from inside Congress?
I will say that this is a little bit of an under-emphasized fact, and a lot of people kind of get it wrong. But not a single person from within the Democratic caucus, so nobody in Congress that was a Democrat, told me that I should resign. And in fact, I had a lot, including the speaker, say that I should not resign. And because they've seen scandals, right? You've been there a long enough time. You watch it happen, and people survive them. You kind of go low, you go under the radar for a while, you wait it out. And I don't know. I think that politically, there's a pretty good chance I could have survived it. There was a poll actually after I left. It was like the next year, and it showed that I was still beating the Republican in the district, even after the scandal had been like well absorbed into the news and everything. So, I didn't have anybody tell me to resign. So, but I also didn't have a lot of people coming out publicly and supporting me. Right. So that's another thing that I don't think we're as good about defending our own. And sometimes that's a good thing, because we shouldn't always defend our own. But we don't circle the wagons and protect in the same way.
Right. And especially with the, like, especially online, right? It's the same thing of like, you know, you see someone who you like, who you believe, who, you know, is your friend, maybe getting like brigaded by a bunch of trolls, whatnot.
Yep.
And if you try to defend, then you sick them on yourself, right? It's just sort of like, you know, distracting the hornet's nest for a little bit. And it's really messed up that it dissuades people from supporting their friends. And, you know, I mean, like, I guess what I was thinking, you know, for a minimal, like lesser extent, you know, the head of Project Veritas, former head, like sicked his little trolls on me. I just muted them. It was fine. You know, who knows? Maybe someone's stalking me right now. Yay. But I didn't get any support. You know what I mean? I had done a story for it. This is for TYT, and I'm not trying to call out TYT. It doesn't matter. But I'm like, oh shit, dude. Like, if anything really happened, like, this is the ghoul of all trolling ghouls. How am I being supported? Right? Like, how are you as a congressperson being supported, or just as a civilian being supported when these kinds of threats are happening? Because that's the other piece of this. It's kind of like, oh, you're on your own. Do your own PR. Do your own security. Do your own. You know, and I think AOC's called this out as well.
Yeah. I'm glad she has, and that she's drawn some attention to it, because I worry about her safety all the time. I think that, you know, she's become less of that that public face of that, that the Republicans are loving to attack just because they have Biden and Hunter and all that. But she's so recognizable as a villain to the right that when the first thing I thought about well, not the first thing, but one of the first things I thought about when January 6th was happening was, oh my God, I hope she gets somewhere safe, because if they got to her, it would have just been horrible. She's tiny. She's and they don't give you security. They don't give you your own security. And anyway, it's
and then when she actually openly spoke about it, which again, I think is also does feel more like a first, to show that vulnerability. And I think more women in office, which I know you're all about with your new PAC, like that's really important. Actually speaking about your fears, speaking about, your past traumas, and I know you who've had your life, thrust into public view, have had to do this and talk about that. And that takes an incredible amount of bravery. And I wanted to talk about, like, what's so chilling about your case to me, I think, is that it was this outlet, red state media, and like the proliferation of online right-wing rags has made it such that, like, they're kind of claiming media status when
100%.
They're just kind of like some dude threw together like a glorified blog. So I know that that's how you actually lost, because you sued them. And you lost that suit because they were protected under some media statute.
First Amendment. Yep. Yeah.
Right.
They claimed First Amendment protection, and the judge basically went for it. So in California, we have something called anti-slap laws it's meant to prevent frivolous lawsuits against the media when people don't like what they have to say.
Right.
That is not the same thing as publishing your naked images without your consent, which is supposed to be protected in California. That was passed several years ago, but there's never been a case before mine where those two laws were kind of pitted against each other, right? And the judge decided, and I'm sure it's because of the constitutionality piece, that this, the First Amendment prevailed and the anti-slap laws prevailed. And so my case was dismissed before it was ever heard. And I was ordered to pay the media outlets that I had sued, which is a totally, I can cuss on. Yeah, it's fucked. It's totally fucked. And so that's why I'm living with my mom, because I had to declare bankruptcy after that whole thing, when I had hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees that I was ordered to pay. And so it's just been, but back to your point, the First Amendment protection shouldn't apply. It's not the press. You shouldn't get to be called the press just because you call yourself the press. Like, I feel like there's got to be some kind of standard, and I don't know how you draw that line. That's not my job to figure out, but I know that it's not right these.
No, because you can't. I mean, look, it's one thing to be like, okay, in a perfect world, in a vacuum, again, the way sort of libertarian brain works, or whatever. Like the First Amendment would only be like, it's like, I get it. You don't want to infringe on that. But in practice, you just allowed, a vindictive, abusive, former partner to work with this so-called media outlet and publish photos of you.
And the person who was the supposed journalist was also the former campaign manager of one of my Republican rivals. So and the other person who I had sued in conjunction with, spreading the images and everything, he's a right-wing blogger, radio host, whatever, who is the chair, or was the chair at the time, of the Republican Party locally. So it's like, how can you say that this is not political? This is not just about free speech in any way, shape, or form. This is about something that's fundamentally wrong. And one of the areas I've sort of focused on since I left is on really developing, helping to develop a coalition and being part of a coalition, a global coalition addressing image-based sexual abuse. And because we still don't even have a federal law basically criminalizing revenge porn. And it needs to happen.
Yes, absolutely. And I even feel like, and this is thanks to your work and also your case, that like just since 2019, I feel like we have way more knowledge of like revenge porn, of the ways how terrible it was. And I think by everyone, I mean, yes, you did resign on your own accord because of I cannot imagine the toll. But I think everyone looks at it and is like, this was so fucked. This was the most fucked, awful case. And it should not have happened to you nor anyone.
Yeah, and I do think that I genuinely believe that most women, if it happened to, I don't think it's very likely to happen to another female elected official, just because of how, like, they might try, but I don't think that they will have the same success at spreading the images all over the place, because I think people are more afraid of the consequences backfiring, which is probably why I would have won if I ran for re-election, because I think it would have genuinely backfired. I had a lot of Republicans even say, like, they shouldn't have been able to do that to you. So I don't know. I mean,
do you have any regrets of not running again?
I think regret is a tough word. I have certainly had times over the years that I've wandered in that direction, right? Like, but I have a son now and he wouldn't have happened if I were in office, and I just don't believe that would have been possible. But because I had fertility issues previously, and I think that being in office and all the stress that your body's going under, I don't think I would have been able to overcome that. So regret is tough, and I don't wish that I was there right now at all. But I do.
You didn't want to be in the Capitol on January 6, 2021.
No, but I was still living in DC there, and my partner, my son's dad was there. So because he's a reporter. So yeah. Well, he was.
I didn't know he was there at the time. Oh my God.
Yeah, that was terrifying. So he was outside of it though, which was,
thank God,
I guess, better. Yeah.
They're running the other way, babe.
Yeah.
They're going away from me.
Yeah.
No, I think that's, I mean, yeah, then my head starts spinning about, how much we need to support moms who are also in office.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And
because having so deeply experienced like the toll of running and serving in elected office, I know that I don't want to do that while Finn's young. Like I just don't, I'm not willing to risk so much. I'm not willing to sacrifice so much, because you do have to sacrifice time with your family. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
That job is too much for me to want to do now. And I don't know that I don't know that I would have felt that way. If I'd become a mom first and then run, I think you have a certain amount of idealism, and you can let yourself believe that whole everything is possible. I don't know. It's hard. I look at moms in office and I think, holy shit, like, how are you doing this?
Oh, for sure. I think, being a mom, it can go either way. Some people say it really radicalized them. It made them like way more involved because they, feel like they have someone to fight for.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like maybe I'm in that, but I'm also like, now when I'm in a plane and I worry, like, I'm like, maybe it's like, this could crash. It'll be all good. I've left my legacy. There you go. There she is. Goodbye. No, but, peace. It's both like not sweating the big stuff a little bit, right? There's a little bit of not sweating, doing what you can do, and you are back actually in action, right? Like, you're back working. What are you doing now? And can you tell us about her time?
Yeah. So my day job, as it were, is back in homeless services, which is what I was doing prior to running for office. And I always, like, for most of my adult life, I thought that was where I was going to spend my entire career. So I'm happy to be doing that again. It's so fulfilling, and also so challenging and frustrating, because homelessness is the result of so many failed policies and or lack of policies. And you can only, it's kind of like, taking water out of a sinking ship. You can only do so much. We're helping as many people as we can, but unless and until you change these systemic failures, we're not going to solve the problem. So that's my day job. And
can I ask you about that and this sort of goes back to where we started about, but like, my hope is to actually you know, again, California eventually breaks off into the Pacific. You know, we
would be
cede from
nice.
the Union. Now that we've got all this rain, we don't need your stinky asses anymore.
Yeah.
We've got water. Thank you. We've got weed, water, wine. Everything's fine. But I do sort of think about California as like, well, if we can try and make it here, but we have all these like, you know, elitist, semi-liberal, like centrist, just like, yes, we have some MAGA areas, but we also just have, again, elitist homeowners who don't want anything to change and don't want their property values to go down.
Yep. And still don't want to pay a lot in taxes. Like they're not going to complain as loudly as you know, their Republican counterparts. But when push comes to shove, they're not happy about it. And they definitely don't. They'll put lip service or you know, smaller charitable donations that aren't at the size that's needed to be able to fix the problem.
Right.
Because it's going to take a massive investment. It's going to take rich people paying more in taxes. It's going to take them sacrificing their, you know, single home designations, right? Where we need to be able to build more multifamily housing. That means that poor people might live in the same neighborhoods as rich people. And that's, you know, not something that people are inclined to support.
They don't even want services. I mean, that's whenever you discuss, like, speaking of like removing water from a sinking ship, like if you discuss harm reduction, if you discuss, you know, yes, how unhoused, you know, services for the unhoused, it's like, yeah, that's great. Not in my neighborhood. Right.
Yeah. Do it down in those other parts where I never even drive through.
Exactly. No. And we did get the like the single family units where there was some change, I think in LA where you're not allowed to build, which is great.
Yeah, they've made it, and they've made statewide changes too, because like I said, we are moving in the right direction. It's just going to take a lot, and building more units, making sure that those units are affordable and not just for the rich people who can afford, you know, these luxury condos. That's part of it, but it's also mental health is a huge factor, and general income inequality, and you know, sort of the breakdown of the social safety net that is particularly bad in certain areas, in the areas where people, it's racial issues, it's criminal justice issues, it's so many things. And I genuinely do believe that compared to when I started in this field 15 years ago, I guess it's 15, a little longer. I started right in college, that we have gone very far in the right direction, but
in the right direction.
In the right direction, we have. Yeah, in California. I'm certainly not going to say in the rest of the country. But people are much more accepting of harm reduction and much more accepting of, you know, the realities of having to build affordable housing, and just the way people, the more people get it and are, you know, generally supportive than they were previously. But that doesn't mean that we're all the way there.
Okay, final question on California, and I'm sorry, just because it's just, I'm, you know, like I said, I'm invested here in a way, and I want people like you leading this state. I want you to get back into politics. I guess, you know, because I'm remembering Governor Newsom just vetoed like a safe injection site bill.
Yeah, I was really disappointed. I'm really disappointed by that, and you know, I've been a supporter of his. He's been a supporter of mine. I just I don't think that was the right call. And I think he caved, because he's planning on running for president at some point. So,
why? So he doesn't want it. Is it fear that it'll come back to bite you, that like the Republicans will use that? They'll use anything.
I don't think it's just the Republicans though. Right. Because you know, it's this whole class of people that don't want to recognize that there are some measures that need to be taken that aren't necessarily palatable, right? Like you don't like the idea, your average voter, unless they're really informed on the issue, doesn't like the idea of the government basically providing drugs for people or providing safe needles. They're not actually providing the drugs, but they
helping people not die. Exactly.
But that's the way that they spin it, is that you're just giving drugs to people. And
do they think the needles have drugs in them? Like the government's Gavin Newsom's gonna get that H, yo. He's definitely helping y'all.
Yeah, just go stand in line. He'll hand it out. Yeah. But
okay, so then what about my wish for you to get back into politics?
I have not completely written it off, but what I will say is that if I were to run again, I do not think I would want to do it in a district that is as split as the one that I ran in. Now, the district that I represented it was CA25 when I was in it with redistricting. It's now called CA27, and it actually has less of the most conservative areas, but it's still held by a Republican. So it's going to be one of the biggest toss-up seats, coming up in 2024 for us to be able to gain back the House. So I'll be focusing a lot of my attention through my PAC and through my personal efforts on that race and on flipping it back to a Democrat. But I don't want to run it. I just know how much harder it is for people in these purple districts who have to, in the first quarter, the first months after getting elected, you already have to raise another $1 million to be able to, to try and secure your seat the next time around. And it's just too much. It's just too much. So if I were to run again, I would probably do it, when I move out of my mom's house in a district that's a safer blue seat, and I can
put mom to work, Katie. That's what grandparents are for, man.
That's great. That part is great. It's just you know how it is.
Katie Hill, former representative of CA25. I'm so honored to have spoken with you. Thank you for your candor and your commitment and your passion. It comes through, and you have so many people's support. And I know it's a rough moment, and it's been a few rough years, but my God, we have your back.
Thank you. Well, tell anybody who's listening, go to her-time.com to check out the PAC. And we're going to be doing a lot of important work, mobilizing young women voters and supporting women on the ballot in this election cycle.
Couldn't be more important, especially when you see how the Republicans, they didn't get their ass handed to them, but they got a cheek handed to them, based on their stance on abortion rights.
Yep. And that's our whole premise, is that if you engage women and especially young women, we will be able to change the tide.
Yes. All right. Katie B, very well. Thank you so much. Come back. And thank you all for being here. We're going to jump to my next guest. You guys get 2 guests in one show. It's incredible. Wait, but first let's take 1 second to thank Sweet Aim Dragon for becoming a member. I'm giving into YouTube memberships. Last time I think I was the first to do so. Let's see if Franny notices. Oh, I noticed. Graph 1980, thank you for your super chat. Hell yeah. Fran is a master Trump troller. Love the singing. Entertainment education makes life easier to digest. Camperman 5000, shit, these days a mid-sized new truck costs as much as a home once did, honestly. TMNFL on YouTube. I make 50 grand a year and just barely escape moving into my car before finding a place that's affordable, in quotes, and it's still too high. It's insane. And let's see. Robert is correcting us. There's a uniform Secret Service, the United States Secret Service Uniform District Division is the federal police force of the U.S. Secret Service. Okay. But I still think there were NYPD there. So but anyway, I want to bring in to discuss this very exciting election that's happening in Chicago right now. He is the web editor at In These Times, based in Chicago. Miles Kampf-Lassin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Exciting day on all accounts. Of course, Trump's indictments eclipsing this, kind of eclipsing, but not really for, Chicagoans and people paying attention to the real shit about this mayoral race that's happening right now. Why is this election so historic?
Yeah, so of course we have the Trump arraignment happening in New York City, in Wisconsin. There's a high-profile Supreme Court race going on today as well. So a big day in politics. But here in Chicago, there's really a monumental occasion of 2 very different strands of politics facing off against one another. Ostensibly 2 Democrats going head-to-head, although one of them is from the far right end of the spectrum, if you even want to call it, as part of the Democratic Party. He's a former head of the school system in Chicago named Paul Vallas.
The CEO of the school system, is that correct?
Exactly. So, in Chicago, there's this weird, basically in the mid 90s, there was this, it's a long story, but there was an effort that was actually led by Republicans in Springfield in, alignment with Mayor Daley at that time, who was kind of a conservative Democrat himself, who was a longtime mayor of the city. They worked to put the schools under mayoral control. So most cities across the country, there's some democracy when it comes to the school system. In
Right.
Chicago, for decades, since the mid 90s, the schools have been under a board of education that's appointed by the mayor. And that included the head of the system, which was no longer a superintendent, but in the 90s became a chief executive officer, as you said, a CEO. And Paul Vallas was the first one of those.
Wow. And
So,
is that still the case with education in Chicago now, or is it
so
has it moved
actually,
to elections? Mhm.
exactly. So this past year just saw a really incredible change in which an elected school board was both embraced by Democratic voters in Chicago and across the state. The state approved it. So there will be, it's going to phase in, but there is going to be an elected school board now. It's going to take a few years before it fully becomes, the people choosing, and the mayor is still going to have an outweighed say. But yes, there has been movement. And in fact, one of the big champions of that effort to bring more democracy to the school system is Paul Vallas's opponent in the race, Brandon Johnson, who is a former public school teacher and former union organizer with the Chicago Teachers Union, and a longtime backer of really a strong progressive vision that includes, social investments and alternatives to the type of over policing that has marked the city for so long. And, what's interesting about the race is that while Paul Vallas has gotten so much funding from right-wing forces, so, there's people like Ken Griffin, who's this Republican mega donor who actually just fled Illinois and moved to Florida because he was like, the Democrats are, too out of control. He's still using, his billions of dollars. He's a hedge fund manager of Citadel, which is a very powerful hedge fund. He's using that to fund all these efforts to, blunt progressive policies. He spent millions of dollars to stop a progressive income tax from passing in Illinois. And he is, and his, allies are the people that are funding Paul Vallas. Paul Vallas is still claiming to be a Democrat, but he has said, that he, back in 2009, actually right after Obama won the presidency, he said he was more of a Republican than a Democrat. And, a lot of people have seen that as a bit of like a dog whistle thing of like, the first black man is elected as the head of the Democratic Party and as, as president, and then you decide to jet, and leave the party and call yourself a Republican. He also says he's fundamentally opposed to abortion. He's attacked unions time and time again. He's, been on the, so he basically is a right-wing guy.
Yeah, right, exactly. But because it's Chicago, he feels like he's got to moonlight or pretend to be a Democrat in order to win the mayoral race. And of course, this is after Lori Lightfoot was ousted by voters and didn't get into the top two. And that's why you got Brandon Johnson, who we're all pulling for and we're rooting for, and go Chicago against, this, sort of free market loving, teacher hating Paul Vallas, and who's, we'll get into some of the weird things he said. But I want to ask about what's their narrative? Like, what are they running on, in the wake of Lori Lightfoot, who I think was criticized rightly, in my opinion, obviously by the left and progressives for her handling of the Black Lives Matter movement and criminal justice reform or lack thereof. And then probably criticized by the right for the exact same thing. What's the narrative that both Vallas and Johnson are floating here? What are they offering?
Sure. So Brandon Johnson has said his goal is to kind of repair the tale of two cities that has marked Chicago for many decades now, where you have massive investment from, hedge funds and, corporate centers that are funneling money into downtown and into the north side and into wealthier, whiter areas, whereas we've seen mass disinvestment across much of the parts of the city that are occupied by residents of color, frankly, and that are poor, that have been left behind. And in order to reconcile that, he's proposed basically a downward redistribution of wealth, taxing the wealthy and corporations and massively increasing investments into these areas that have been left behind. And some of the ways of doing that has been a proposal to have year-round funding for youth employment, which, as many studies have shown, is the way to actually attack the root causes of crime and violence, not to mention poverty, which is endemic in these areas. And so it's really a progressive vision based on equality and equity in the city that would be transformational, considering the way that corporate-backed interests have controlled politics in the city for so long, both under Daley as well as Rahm Emanuel, who was mayor for many years himself. He basically handed the city over to the highest bidder and pushed all these privatization plans, closed schools, and certainly Paul Vallas is promising more of the same. And I would say about Lori Lightfoot is that she promised a progressive vision. That's what she ran on. And I think that's why she won, is because she made commitments to invest in affordable housing, to support alternative approaches to things like mental health, to increase investments, to fund public schools. And then she reneged on those promises once she got into office. She pretty quickly shifted her politics to become more like her predecessors and Rahm Emanuel. And Paul Vallas, what he's running on is he just says, crime and cops all the time, basically.
Right.
He's just trying to do a laser focus on the issue of crime and public safety. But his solutions to that are not the kind of more comprehensive approaches that Brandon Johnson's offering. They're strictly, let's put more money and hire more cops and put money into law enforcement. Whereas we've seen that's been the strategy for so many years, and we've only seen the police budget increase. We've only seen the number of cops increase, and yet crime has not gone down, specifically in the areas where it's most prevalent, because crime, especially violent crime, is really segregated in the city. And the areas that it's impacting the most are actually the areas that, at least in the first round, tended not to go for Paul Vallas. So I think he's using real fear tactics to appeal to the type of largely white voters and more affluent voters in the city that are freaked out by the idea of crime, but they actually aren't the ones that are facing the results of it. And what we've seen is, when we've had investments in these alternatives, because there are some pilot programs that do things that Brandon Johnson is calling for in the city right now, that provide mental health specialists to go along with police to respond to emergencies, that have hotlines that so people can call, because we know that a large amount of 911 calls are for people that are experiencing emergencies, but they don't necessarily, it's not an ongoing crime. And those programs are successful, right? So we've seen that there is, actual benefit to the type of policies being approached by Brandon Johnson, and not to mention the whole host of left-wing candidates that have recently won office in the city of Chicago that have similarly run on these platforms. But Paul Vallas has just said, no, the answer is cops. So,
right, of course, it's the same thing. I mean, and maybe cops plus, because he's, he's got this privatization record, specifically with schools, which I want you to just expand upon, and then maybe like what would he do if he were the head of a police force or just a mayor? Like, how could Chicago, which, to be honest with you, as someone who doesn't know Chicago very well, the times that I have been, I'm like, and I know it's changing, but I was like, wow, this is a city that feels like there's a little bit more of a middle class than, let's say, where I was living, which is San Francisco, or cities that are like super divided, like incredible, inequality and gaps between the rich and poor. Chicago's like, all right, this still has some sort of middle class that's like, living here. I assume he would probably want to do away with that. But anyway, I wanted to ask you about what is his privatization record, especially when it comes to, this is fascinating, New Orleans and the school system there.
So Paul Vallas he's walked away from this, but he previously bragged about the fact that there are no longer any public schools in New Orleans after he became the head of the school system there after Katrina. He went in and basically took over the Recovery School District and replaced all the private schools with charters, with alternatives run by private operators that largely had a profit motive, that were virulently anti-union, and worked to cancel all collective bargaining agreements. And that actually were really horrible for many students because they enforced these strict zero tolerance policies. So students would face expulsion or suspension for really minor infractions, like wearing the wrong color, article of clothing one day or something. And the result of that is, yes, people were able to, kids got kicked out of the school district. And he bragged about test scores going up, but they implemented these really laser set approaches, provided standardized testing as the only determinant of student success. So teachers just would teach to the test. And then so many kids got kicked out, expelled and suspended from the schools. That helped to kind of change the numbers that made it look like he was being a successful administrator. But what he was really doing was taking all control out of the hands of the actual residents of New Orleans. Right. And in Chicago, when he was the head of the school system here, first of all, he privatized the janitorial services, like custodial staff. And that helped to really create discord within the schools, because as anybody who's gone and worked in a school knows, it's a community, right? And then people know each other, they work together, the teachers, the custodial staff. And so when you bring in private contractors, they don't have those same relationships. That really lowered the cleanliness of the schools. But then he also set up these standards which opened the door to mass school closures that were done later, especially under Rahm Emanuel. He closed 50 schools by using a lot of the same criteria that Paul Vallas had put in place when he was CEO. So that's kind of his record on privatization. He's done it everywhere he's been. When he was in Philadelphia, Paul Vallas was the head of the school system there. He pursued privatization. He did it in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And they actually brought him to both Haiti and Chile as well after earthquakes in 2010. And there he pushed this kind of Milton Friedman supermarket focused approach. So he has a long track record of doing this across not just the country, but across the globe.
That's insane. He reminds me of the former chief of police in New York when I was living there, the former NYPD head. What was his name? Like Kelly. His last name's Kelly, and I'm forgetting his first name. But he's like, he oversaw like the RNC mass arrests in the year 2004 when I was arrested. And like, I was like, this guy, I think it's Charles Kelly. I can't remember his name, but I was like, this guy, he's a criminal. Like he's a total thug. He's just sweeping up people who are nonviolently protesting. He's never going to get a job. This guy's a disgrace. No. He's contracted all over the world to work with police across the world. This is like the same, consultant from hell, but for schools. Like, oh, you want more charters? You want to privatize things? You want to break up unions? I'm your guy.
Exactly. I think that it's a classic case of the conservative white guys failing up, and it just keeps on going. But the failure, it just depends on what your judgment is, because he's made a lot of money for a lot of people, right? There's been interests that have been benefiting.
You're a charter school, if you're the DeVos family. I mean, I don't know.
Exactly. And you actually see that there's this PAC that was started by the DeVos family that has funded Paul Vallas in this race for Chicago mayor. And that PAC is also taking a lot of money from the Walton family, which is, the richest family in the country that runs Walmart. So the billionaires are really getting behind their candidate. And it's not because they think he's failing. It's because they think he's being successful, because the money keeps, flowing upward. And we keep on being able to resist teacher unions. And I think that that's actually a real fundamental point about this election, is that Paul Vallas, his plan is to take on the Chicago Teachers Union, that has become a really powerful force in city politics in terms of building a progressive alternative to this neoliberal corporate model that has run city governance for so many years. And they've done that through backing challengers, especially in the city council, but now on the mayoral level as well. And Brandon Johnson obviously comes out of the CTU. The CTU helped to lead a number of strikes that were not only over quality of life issues in the schools, but really bargaining for the common good, trying to increase the type of issues that can be bargained over to address things like housing and affordability and students facing homelessness, things like this. That's the kind of approach of the Chicago Teachers Union, and that's what I think a lot of these interests see as a real threat to the type of politics as usual that's been in place for so long. And so Paul Vallas would be
he's their guy. He's perfectly their guy.
Exactly. And he would be able to probably be pretty effective because he is ruthless when it comes to these types of policies. He has a long record of it, and he has so many friends across the country that are part of this corporate first agenda. And that's what's interesting about these races that are nonpartisan, is that you're right. Paul Vallas claims to be a Democrat, says he's a lifelong Democrat. He's even gotten a lot of like Obama world behind him. The people like Dick Durbin. Exactly. And Arnie Duncan is a big backer, who was an education secretary under Obama, is a big backer of Vallas. So a lot of these people have gotten into his court. But if this was a race where you had to have a party affiliation, Paul Vallas would definitely be the Republican in the race, because look at the type of policies he's running on. They're all in line. And a lot of the people that are backing him, including John Catanzaro, who's the head of the police union in Chicago, which has endorsed Paul Vallas, is a huge Trump supporter and has been outspoken about, saying that it's a witch hunt against Trump, and, this indictment is of a national disgrace and things like this, and is actually a big supporter of the January 6th insurrectionists. Like, these are the people that are in Paul Vallas's camp, and yet he's claiming to be a Democrat.
I wanted to throw this up here. Speaking of that witch hunt line, I think Vallas also echoed it, asked in a radio conversation about efforts to hold the 45th president to account for stirring up supporters who sought to block certification of the 2020 election results. Vallas said of the impeachment initiative, "I've always felt it was a witch hunt." So here you go. Witch hunt. He said it from his mouth.
There's a whole long history of basically the 2 years running up to this election. Paul Vallas has spent courting the far right and the MAGA voters. And he's done that by going on shows by people like Jeannie Ives, who was a right-wing challenger to even the Republican that ended up running for governor. And the last time around, she was a far right of him, as well as he spoke at a fundraiser for this group, Awake Illinois, that is completely homophobic and transphobic. That's their whole political agenda.
Sure.
So it's no surprise. And when he's done these appearances on a lot of these shows, he's said this kind of stuff. He's been super critical, not just of Biden, but of Obama and J.B. Pritzker, all these like national Democrats. And he's been kind of defensive of Trump and the far right. Certainly said things that are more letting off the hook a lot of the people involved in the January 6th Capitol riot. So this is the type of community that Paul Vallas has been appealing to. Now he's tried to moderate, right? He's just focused on crime and tried to avoid saying any of these things that could be a little bit more controversial.
Yeah. Can you just tell me, because when will we know, what is it looking like in terms of polling, and what would it mean if Brandon Johnson won?
It would truly be historic if Brandon Johnson won. This is 40 years out from when Harold Washington became mayor of Chicago, and he was the last time there was a progressive mayor in the city. He was also the first Black mayor, and he faced a lot of challenges because the entrenched interests and networks in the city ossified to help to block anything he would put forward. And I think we would probably see a kind of similar pushback under a Brandon Johnson administration. The difference is there's a lot of really progressive left-wing people in office right now across the city council. He has
I met some of them.
Tons. Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm talking about. So there's a squad here in Chicago that's ready to back him up and really help to harness the momentum that has come behind him in this election. In terms of polling, I mean, the race is happening right now. There's a few hours left until polls close. We'll see what I have seen some heartening numbers of youth involvement because it was really dismal in the first round of this race, the primary, basically in late February. Only 3% of voters from 18 to 24 voted.
Shit.
That's sad, right?
It's terrible, yeah.
And that's where he has the most support, is among young voters, not just 18-year-olds. Obviously, I mean, anybody basically under 50 is more likely to be a Brandon Johnson voter, but those are communities that are less likely to actually come out and vote, not
Right.
because they don't support him, but just because it's not in their nature. You know, they need more motivation, whereas the older voters, who are much more likely to go for Vallas, especially older white voters, are incredibly consistent in Chicago when it comes to turning out to vote. And so I think that's really what it's going to come down to, is the turnout, because if it was just judged off popularity, of course, I think Brandon Johnson would be cruising to victory, but it's, you know, you got to actually go and cast your ballot. So
You've got, yeah, exactly. And I can imagine that defeating Lori Lightfoot in the run, I mean, in the first round here, was probably a pretty big boost to young folks who are like, oh shit, it's not just going to be kind of this mealy mouthed, you know, same old, we might have something real. So I feel like having a real progressive candidate could excite young folks if they get out. If you are listening in the Chicago and you are from, you can vote in the Chicago mayor's race. Go vote. God damn it. Stay in line. But, so excited. Thank you so much for dropping by, Miles. Is there anything else you wanted to add? I mean, like, it's gonna really suck if he loses, if Brandon Johnson loses. And I say that, I'm sorry that's so glib, but like it'll be more than, it would be awful. You know, I similarly felt the same way here in LA's mayoral race. Against whatever the fuck his asshat name is. I forgot what his name is already because I don't care about
Well, I'll
him.
just say, I think there's actually some real parallels to, you know, Paul Vallas is not as rich as Rick Caruso was, but he's similarly an agent of the ruling class, right? Who is been set up to take down a progressive challenger. And I think Brandon Johnson is even more from the real, like, left-wing fighting movement than Karen Bass, although Karen Bass obviously has, you know, more actual elected experience.
Karen Bass sort of sits between Lightfoot and, you know, Brandon Johnson. We'll see, you know, TBD. And Caruso is, I mean, he's an agent of Auntie Anne's pretzel factory as well. He just, because he's a, you know,
and he owns those movie theaters and stuff, right?
Exactly. I know. I hate it. I have, and he charges way too much for parking, son of a bitch. But yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, I just think that's, I mean, it's a similar dynamic, right? Is that there's one of the candidates is the one put up by the billionaires, and another candidate is the one that's literally coming out of the union, the most left-wing fighting militant labor union, probably in the Midwest. And that's the stakes of this election. I do think that it's, if Paul Vallas does succeed, it will be because of voter apathy largely, and much less about there being a mandate for his policies, because it's going to just rest on the areas of the city that are much more conservative, that are much more likely to vote. And I think it would inspire some real resistance in the city, right? In the way that people were certainly resistant to Rahm Emanuel, especially when he won a second term, because, you know, residents became familiar with the type of policies he was representing and pushing. With Paul Vallas, I think there's been a lot of political education over the course of this race, and the people that are pro Brandon Johnson are also really anti-Vallas. And so if he wins, there's going to be a real strong resistance to him, and certainly that'll take place in the halls of power and city council, but also on the streets as well. And if Brandon Johnson can win, it's, as I said, I think that a lot of the political establishment in the city is going to do what they can to counteract that victory with as much objection and you know, trying to throw some sand in the gears as possible. Exactly. So but that's going to mean, it's going to mean more that, like, the movement is going to have to counter that with, you know, providing some support of their own. And that's, I think that's an interesting challenge and opportunity that I think the city would be well positioned to deal with, especially you know, in 2023. So it's going to be thrilling, whatever happens.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think especially what you just said, like CTA being so active, and then the city council having, open lefties on it. Like, just Chicago is primed either way to fight a Vallas mayor or to support and defend a Brandon Johnson mayor. And I think that's really awesome. And that's what you get when you have a leader who's running for mayor in the first place, who comes from the grassroots, who comes from an organizing background. That person's going to be way better positioned to defend and fight than someone kind of swooping in with a bunch of money, right? Or or even just a leftist who's kind of running like a name recognition campaign rather than a grassroots campaign. I think so. So if Johnson does pull this off, it'll be a huge lesson in for progressives on how to win. So just thank you for all of this extensive coverage, and I'm like, we're all really, again, lots of candles being lit. No, what fuck candles? Lots of doors being knocked and votes being cast. So, Miles, it's been awesome. Miles Kampf-Lassin, where can people find you and your work?
Yes, please check out In These Times. The website's inthesetimes.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Miles K. Lassin, MILES KLASSIN. I'll also have some coverage of the race, whatever the outcome is. You can check that out on my social media as well.
Sweet. All right. Take good care. Thanks for stopping by. And thank you all for being here. We have one more story to do. My personal fave. We're going to end it with a final fun segment, although this story is probably the most insane of the week, more so even than the Trump indictment. But I just wanted to say, let's see. Jess Camaro says, heads up, severe dangerous weather in a big chunk of central U.S. Please be weather aware today and spread the word, trying to help save lives. Absolutely. Guys, I think there's some kind of there's like tornado watch and shit. Like, everything's going on. I mean, I want to say it's a Vallas inside job or something, but be careful, everybody. Also, God's favorite mathematician on Twitch, what's up to the Twitch community? Hi. Says it's Raymond Kelly. His son is Greg Kelly from Newsmax. He was an anchor on Good Day New York until he got arrested for domestic violence. No. The son of a police chief arrested for domestic violence? Well, I never. That is just the most predictable thing I've ever heard. And yeah, that bitch, Raymond Kelly, got arrested under his watch for sure. And with all that, y'all, let's move to our final segment. Let's wrap this baby up real quick, because we got to talk about it. I'm introducing a new segment. You guys know I go hard for the defund movement. I hold out for moving all of the money into things that actually prevent violence. And that is not cops. So here is my final segment, new segment, reason number 745 to defund. There's probably, in fact, there are way more than 745. That's just probably people who were, shot by cops in the last couple years. But we wouldn't know that because we don't really have a database of any of that. But here is the most incredible story and a reason to absolutely defund the police and to not trust police unions just because they have the word union in them and we think they're somehow with the people and working class. They're not. They're not. They're there to defend their own impunity when they shoot and kill unarmed Black people. That's what they're there to do. And here we have the story of Lil Miss Joanne Segovia, who is the head of the largest police union in California and was just busted for international fentanyl smuggling, people. So she was charged with importing, get this, fentanyl, muscle relaxers, and other drugs through the mail. She allegedly attempted to blame her housekeeper, the fucking Karen, after federal agents started asking questions about the illegal operation. It took the feds to come in. Prosecutors have accused 64-year-old Joanne Segovia, executive director of the San Jose Police Officers Association, of running a, quote, scheme to bring synthetic opioids into the country and distribute them through the United States. Well. Looky here. Looky who's been importing all the fentanyl. all that horrible fentanyl that we've heard about, that if you're in the 5-block radius of, you just drop dead right there. You got convulsions. All the fentanyl that actually has been killing people. But of course, the cops are staging all those, if you've seen them, ridiculous videos where it's like, this dog encountered fentanyl and we performed Narcan on the dog. And it's just a whole thing. Fentanyl. It's the latest thing. The latest thing we have to be super, super scared about. The rainbow fent that's going to make its way into your children's Halloween candy. All of that shit. And lo and behold, little Miss Joanne's fabrics. I don't think so. Joanne's fentanyl. That's what it is. So you guys want to know what Joanne looks like? There she is, guys. She's got one of them sherbet hairstyles, I'd call it. That's when you have like blonde on top and a little bit of the red on the bottom. I call it a sherbet. Looking like she shops at Chico's, just there, a big smile. She's been an employee of the police union since 2003. She's been described as the grandma of the organization. Grandmas are always trying to like slip you a little candy or rainbow fent, which represents rank and file staff at a department of more than 1,000 officers. The union has lobbied for tougher laws against fentanyl in California, even as evidence appears to show. Segovia used her own office to conduct drug deals, ordering thousands of pills from her suppliers abroad, primarily suspected to be in India. Wow, interesting. Photos included in the charging document show Segovia used police union shipping labels after repackaging the prescription meds, which included various types of sedatives and painkillers. Whiteness is incredible. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, if you heard from the sherbet haircut and everything, and if you're just listening, yes, she's a white lady, middle-aged white lady. And just the audacity, the gall to use police union, like I don't want to go through all the trouble of creating a PO box for this, or trying to distance myself from this. Why don't we just use the police union return address? That's fine. We'll just slap that on here. All good. Segovia, and this is great. So they got, I guess prosecutors got access to her text messages of doing the drug deals. And she even wrote in some of them, this was dated June 14th, 2021. Sorry, I had 50 new officers starting today. So if I've been all tied up this morning, I'll be back in the office within an hour and I'll take care of it. Any news on the Soma? I don't know what that is. Is that a muscle relaxer? Y'all, somebody tell me. In another message on May 2nd, Segovia wrote, I'm so sorry. I'm on a business trip because we had 2 officers that got shot. I should be home tomorrow night so I can get them shipped as soon as I can. This is like, what is this, fucking Etsy for fentanyl? I'll let you know when I've shipped it. Yay, your items are on the way. They are coming from a San Jose police union. Oh, did an officer go down because of fentanyl? The call is coming from within the building. Now, it gets even a little bit better than this. I'm trying to see if I can pull this up here because, we all know that San Francisco, or that unions have, police unions are pretty much in the business of ensuring that none of their officers are held to account, and that they keep on getting that money and they keep on, making their case for why they need more of it. I just want to say I'm bringing up my Twitter screen and I am insanely triggered by the fact that Elon Musk has changed the Twitter logo to a fucking a Dogecoin image, people. But anyway, this is from Jackie Fielder, organizer here in California, who brought some goddamn receipts. It turns out that the San Jose Police Officers Association was signing checks to, guess what? Oh, a PAC that opposed Chesaboudin. You guys remember the progressive DA who was accused of being too light on criminals, which was totally made up, and was recalled effectively and ousted from his position. They were donating. Here we go. San Jose Police Officers Association PAC. There we go. Right there. This is the PAC of Committee for a Safer and Cleaner San Francisco opposing Boudin for district. Blah, blah, blah. What is this? Let me open this. Okay. It's just truncated. It's just, you can't make this shit up. I mean, you can because it's so fucking predictable. So there we are, Joanne. What you got to say for yourself, huh? You feel like she's going to be back on the job shortly? I can't. I mean, and you guys, you think this is a one-off? You think this is the only police union that's involved in any kind of drug dealing? No. I don't. You don't need a tinfoil hat to know that. You just need to watch The Wire. And there wasn't even that much police drug. They were like pretty good in that one. They didn't really touch the unions. They should have done another season about unions. Anyway, all you good people, that has been the show. Thank you so much for being here. I want to close this out the way we always close it out, which is with the fart song. Thanking all of the patrons who support the show. Again, this is literally a labor of love. I don't know how I pull the fucking dope guests that I pull. It's a little bit of Franny magic. It's a little bit of Paige Omek, my producer magic. But we bring you the best of the best, and we do it with your support. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. $5, $10 a month gets you that shout out. You get discounts on merch, which I just did my taxes, and oh my God, not making any money from that merch, y'all. But that being said, you do get 20% off. But if you want to support the show, go get more merch. Bitchuationroom.com to get that. It is union made. I think that's what's happening to me. Trying to support. Not really working out. But with that, let's get into the best part of the show, the best time. If I can do this, the fart song. Right. More. Have one, however, Timothy Brennan upped your pledge from 20 to $50 a month, entering the Horchata Armada. Welcome, bienvenido. Wait, we do have a $10 pledge. Brian Williard. Hell yeah, welcome to the Frantifa, my dude. And thank you so much to all the Twitch subs, to Brandy Lutu, gave out a community sub. Frank Morningtree gave out 5 community subs. You blessing from Jesus. And thank you again, if I didn't say Punch Up Dragon for resubscribing with Prime, Marcus Aurelius for subscribing for 11 months over there on Twitch. And remember to thank Pedro Maximilian Inhofe and to Andy Vasoyan. We stream every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on YouTube and Twitch. Follow us on Twitter at Bitchuation Pod if you still fuck with Twitter. But really, let's go over to Instagram and TikTok at FrannyFio. You know where it is. And remember to fight the power, to fuck the patriarchy, and to not just bitch about it, but to be about it. Hell yes. See you next time.